Hey everyone, what is up? It is Digital Optimist here. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Den. Quick favor to ask, hit that subscribe button. When you hit that subscribe button, that's going to allow me to attract top tier guests to provide you with the most value possible. Give me a follow over on X at Digital Optimist. Let's get started. Welcome to Beyond the Den. Today, we delve into the daring journey of Damon Gura, who, after a lucrative sale of his gaming company, boldly ventured into the uncharted waters of Web3 with InfiniGods. It's a saga of risk, innovation, and unyielding vision. Let's dive in. What is up, Damon? Super stoked to have you on the show today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. Congratulations with your podcast. I feel like it's really high quality stuff. I see on my Twitter feed all the time, so you must be doing something right.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to, answer some questions, maybe more intimate about myself for the audience who may have heard some of this stuff on various different, audio related spaces, etc., that I've been on along the way. And, I just appreciate the opportunity to maybe dive deeper into that.
Cool. Very cool, brother. So how would you summarize your journey from traditional gaming to pioneering in the Web3 gaming space?
Well, I appreciate the pioneering bit. I've been in the space in the gaming space professionally since '97. Back then, the gaming platforms that I worked on were more, I guess, technical in nature, pretty hardcore embedded systems was what we called them, but basically custom hardware, custom software. I was making slot machines of all things back in the day.
Yep.
I made those for quite a number of years. And it's interesting because you think a slot machine might be a pretty straightforward device.
Sure.
And the games on those types of products would be pretty obvious and pretty straightforward. And they all sort of feel the same to the untrained eye. Nothing's further from the truth. Back in '97, there was a big movement from, call it your old school mechanical style slot machine, to a video style, almost like a video game, to be honest with you, back then. And then there was a lot of innovation at that point around moving from that traditional style game to something that had these secondary games as part of them. So, you'd get a certain combination on the slot machine and it would take you off to this extra game that you played for bonus credits, for real money bonus credits, of course, because it's a casino game. But honestly, there was a ton of innovation happening during that period from, call it the late 90s to, probably to today, but certainly a sweet spot in the late 90s, early 2000s, even, 2010-ish timeframe. I was on our kind of innovation panel where we did a lot of IP. So we'd actually file for patents. I probably filed personally. I was on a named vendor on 200, something like this. A lot, that's a pretty high number for that kind of process because it's long and drawn out. And then it takes 4 to 5, 6 years for those to get issued, if they even do get issued.
Mm-hmm.
So during that process of talking about new features in a slot machine game, talking about, could we do completely different types of casino style gambling types of games, really put the company that I worked for on that kind of cutting edge. And it got me personally into that kind of innovation process. I was a software developer. I was running game development at the time. I know it was for casino style games, but honestly, the wagering piece does kind of resonate with me because it's something of value, tangible value when I think about the Web3 space. So I do see some I don't want to compare casino with Web3, but I do see some parallels there. I was running actually research and development for the company at one point. And, just getting into that sort of R&D, patent filings, creating our own sort of brand new content, pioneering that particular space at the time, and really resonated with me personally. And so everything I've done post, that original kind of professional career, I've wanted to be on that forefront, and I started a company after that experience that did quite well. I ended up selling that. But then that is now InfiniGods. And it was too hard for me to sit on the sidelines as I'm watching that Web3 space kind of come into its own and start from nothing, right? I'd sort of been on the sidelines paying attention to crypto, but I didn't really dig too deep into it because I was running my own company at the time, 24/7 company. And then when I saw the GameFi part of the space kind of start to come to fruition, that's when my mind started racing. Like, hold on a second, we're going to change the global economy and how people sort of view that and gaming simultaneously. I want to do that.
Yeah, super cool. Perfect, like, marriage for you right there. That's awesome. So, and you talked about the GameFi games that you saw. Was there any games in particular that you saw that you were like, yeah, this is my jam? I know you're a big fan of Wolf Game, right? I mean, obviously that was probably a little later, but did you find any?
It was later, and that actually is a good one. So if I take a step back, it was probably Apathy, which I know probably for most folks was one of their earlier inspirations. Looking at that project and following it on the periphery and kind of, letting my mind wander with what could be possible with these new blockchain levers, and then seeing a company like that kind of have the early success that they had as a early first mover / early mover, and thinking, okay, well, what next? What else could happen? And then I started diving into the space more deeply. When I made casino games, I'd never felt like I really understood what I was doing until I sat in front of a slot machine for 8-12 hours. 50 beers into it, maybe not quite 50, but you get the point. Really trying to put my mind into like, what is the true customer experience here? Like, what am I doing here? Yeah, I know I'm making slot machines and they pay me a lot of money. It's great. But until I kind of put my mind in the customer view, I didn't really feel like I truly understood that psychology. And so for me, when I got into Web3, while I understood the sort of high level part of it, okay, there's these blockchain things and you can plug them in traditional game things, or maybe you could do some new things. Before I kind of dove too deep into that, I wanted to dive deep into some projects. And you bring up one like Wolf Game as a good example. I sort of loved everything about that project. I still love the project. And I guess at this point, pretty heavily invested personally in the project in terms of asset holdings, et cetera. That's the thing. I really wanted to invest in these games. So I carved out a pretty big chunk of capital to buy NFTs in projects, buy NFTs in games, some games, some non-game projects, some like art-based, et cetera. There's different categories of projects that I just wanted to understand the space in general. Yeah. And I think as through the process of kind of owning assets, and then when you own something, just like back in the casino day when I'm putting $1,000 in a slot machine and mostly losing it, you become a lot more tangible. Engaged,
Yeah. Yes, so, man.
It just helped me, it helped me kind of like sort of deeply understand the space, I think, and parallel to that, sort of work with, the InfiniGods team to kind of define where do we live in that space.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What year was that when you started down that rabbit hole of NFTs?
Wow. So I want to say like hardcore NFT buying was probably a year and a half ago-ish, something like that. But following the space has been years. Once I started working with my co-founder, Owen, on our plans of doing our seed raise, which we did, how are we going to stake our product strategy and our sort of business strategy in this space? That's when I felt like, okay, look, I feel comfortable talking about a lot of different genres and styles and types of gaming, but the crypto part of that, and how the Web3 part and how does that intersect with called traditional styles of games, I did not feel like I was there yet. And so that's when I said, you know what, I got to degen into this. This is the only way for me to really speak and feel comfortable with what I'm saying, that I feel like I know what the hell I'm talking about.
Sure.
And so I want to think that's really around that time when we first started InfiniGods, when I really went all in into digital assets.
I wanted to ask you how it all started with Owen. How did you meet him?
I love that, actually. I don't know if we talked about this before in a previous conversation. Just walking a few steps back in my journey, after that company, the casino company that I worked at, I was actually there for 20 years, which maybe for younger people like, who the fuck works in the same place for 20 years? You don't see that anymore. It's pretty unusual. But anyway, there's lots of reasons I get into as to why I stayed at the place for 20 years. At any rate, once I decided it was my time to kind of start up and do my own thing, that I, at this point learned a lot from a lot of different sources, degrees, on job, whatever, experience. I decided to start my own company in 2014, a company called DGM Games. And I thought, at that point, the free-to-play mobile space was really in high gear. If not, I would probably call the market mature even back then in 2014. So entering a mature market is a pretty hard thing to do, just in general. So in order to really be effective at entering a mature market, there's a few different strategies you can employ, but one of the ones I decided to do was taking that kind of innovation approach. A lot of strong competitors in the particular side of the space that I was getting into. Now, it happened that I created it was called Social Casino, a social casino game. So playing slot machines basically in a mobile phone app for not for money, just for fun. And you might think, well, who the hell does that? It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, so lots of people do that.
How does it generate revenue?
Yeah, so it's in-app purchase. You basically go in, you buy packs of virtual coins, virtual currency, however you want to think of it, and you play these virtual machines for entertainment value is basically what you get out of it at the end of the day. And again, huge business, multi-billion-dollar business, lots of massive competitors by 2014. That space probably started in 2010 with already some big names. And so, I'm entering this space like, coming off of a bunch of years and lots of casino roles, thinking, what the hell am I going to do? So I decided to do the particular strategy that I did. But at any rate, launched my game and started in February 2014. And I launched my game July 4th of 2014. 4th of July weekend in the US actually is a big weekend for casino products for a variety of reasons. So holidays typically do really well because people have extra time basically to play. So first off, the KPIs or the metrics from the game were instantaneously amazing, which was not expected.
What kind of KPIs?
For example, average revenue per daily user. So actually it's called ARPDAU, average revenue per daily active user. So typical numbers in let's just call it normal side of social, not casino. Let's call it like Candy Crush, those types of games. Those numbers are usually pretty low on a per person basis. They just have a zillion people in the game, so it makes it work. Those numbers would be maybe 10 cents per, average revenue per user, maybe less, maybe slightly more, but that's generally. And casino style products were known to have a much higher ARPDAU, typically in the 20 to 30 cents per user mark. It's called 2, 3, maybe even 4x, depending on the game.
Wow.
So I was running at 80 cents to $2, which is unexpected. I didn't expect those numbers. So
how early on did you start hitting those numbers? Like in 2014? Like how early on?
My first weekend, it actually went up from there. So I probably started at 60 cents and then it went to 80 cents once we got a little bit more, once we kind of dissected and did some other things, to kind of optimize around that. But, it's let's not call it, it's not easy, but it's hard to get those numbers no matter what size of audience you have. But, early stages, it's typically a little bit easier because you don't have a large number of people yet. So then the question was, can we scale this thing? We actually did. We maintained those numbers, scaled the game. And let's call it a few months into the product, I got an email into my customer service, which was me, because I built the game by myself in a library during the day because I'd quit my 20-year job for this, which is a whole other situation we could get into around the personal, decision-making process of that, because I'm not 20-something, So there was a whole
and you have kids. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I had kids, and there's a whole story there that's, I remember like it was yesterday. But at any rate, through that process, this getting a reach out from Facebook, like I said, they reached out through my customer service email channel. I had a call with a representative from their company, and it was Owen on the call with, he was one of the first people I made contact with there. And so we had maintained a relationship ever since. And this is back in 2014. I stayed on with that company through a sale and et cetera, and even growing it to multiple countries and all this good stuff through the end of 2020. So that was a 6-year kind of end-to-end journey for me. I'd known him throughout that period And once my time, finished at that company and I was looking to do InfiniGods, per the conversation we had earlier, of all the things I was kind of keeping my eye on, Web3, et cetera, that's when Owen and I, were on the phone and we're like, we gotta find a way to make this work. So put a strategy together and raise some capital and put a good team together. And here we are.
Wow. Fascinating story, man. I mean, you never know where your good's going to come from, right? And
that's exactly it, right? I do feel like you need to educate yourself, work hard, put yourself in the right position, put yourself out there. I can tell you it wasn't an easy decision for me to go from a 20-year job, which I can tell you by the end of that 20 years, things were pretty good for me, both economically, both status in the company, et cetera. To take the decision of leaving that and going to zero, and not only going to zero, but also like it's got to get funded somehow. We got to pay our bills still. So, it's not just nothing's coming in, it's stuff still going out. So, that whole decision process at this point, I have 3 kids. Turned out during the process of building that company, my wife came in and told me we're having a 4th. So, it's just a lot of pressure. And when you're, at this point, I was early 40s, let's say, you have to have a lot of faith in yourself, I guess. And you have to have a determination. And I wasn't naive to think that it couldn't fail. I was more like, I'm going to fucking make it work. Of course it can fail, but I'm not going to let myself think like that right now. And I do think, putting yourself out there, having the skill set to back it up and, having a strategy and kind of sticking to it. And, all that I think does feed into success at some level. There's certainly elements of luck and all those other things that for sure.
Wow. What was your wife's reaction when you told her that you were doing this?
That's a good question. I'll try to filter this part of the conversation. Yeah. Let's just say it was difficult. Again, kids, house, stability, things going really well, looking at it from her perspective of me coming in and knocking on the door and saying, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And she's, and then I'm describing to her, yeah, it's this casino thing, but no, you don't actually pay any money. Why do people play? Like, just for fun. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't understand. You're going to do what? You're going to leave to do, it was a lot of bewilderment on her side. Like,
sure.
And then finally she was like, no, you're not doing that. And so, there was some back and forth conversations there. And it was the start of the process of determination. It's like, I understand her position. I've got to be determined in the failure that I could have in the market and the idea itself, which is one set of problems. But I also have to have a strong will because I have to help her, I have to carry her through this process. And sure. I'm not naive again to like align with why she was acting that way and how she felt, those feelings that she had. I totally get it. It makes a logical sense. But, when you're the person trying to do that thing and, you're not quite hearing that support, which you might initially expect, even though it does make you intentionally react, it just makes you have to harden up a bit, I mean, that was really my first test of, am I going to do this or not? Because I could have easily caved and said, what, you're right. Let me go back. I'm not going to leave. I'm crazy. This is stupid. 40 something again, hard to kids, bills, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? All these questions that I basically had to answer. We'll just have to make it work. I didn't have like every answer and everything perfect. So
yeah, there had to be some faith and meeting halfway on her end too, for sure.
Exactly.
This seems like a similar story from when you sold the company, right? And then getting into, okay, now I'm going to start this new company. Yeah. So it seems like a similar conversation that you had, same risk element, right? Where you probably did pretty well on the sale, right? You built this company, blood, sweat, and tears, built it up over 6 years. Then you get to a point where, all right, I'm going to sell it. You could cash out. I mean, you're supposed to be living the dream, playing some golf, and
for me at this point,
Yeah.
And honestly, like there's some story, we brushed over the 6 years, but there's stories in the middle, where, okay, I sell the company, I'm on for what's called an earnout, to kind of like maximize the opportunity. for me personally and for the person who's acquiring, to kind of maximize the opportunity for them to grow the company. And so, there was some difficult choices in that 6 years. I ended up acquiring another company that was based in Tel Aviv, which is not Austin, Texas, where I live now. And so lots of travel, that had an arm in, their developers who were in Ukraine at the time. They had another content creation part of the company, which was based in Sydney, Australia. And so me taking that on in the middle, which happened in end of 2015. So literally Jan 2016, I was traveling all over the world trying to glue all this together.
Sure.
That was another challenge that I had with the family.
Yeah.
And she's like, why are you doing this? We already sold, yeah, we can maximize this other thing, but it's not all about the money. And, so there were some challenges there because of course I understand that mindset. And then like you say now, fast forwarding to, okay, that's over. It's the end of 2020. I'm jumping into yet another thing, she's thinking, okay, I've had enough, at one point. So, but she's, of course, saw the success of the previous venture and she was supportive at this point. But yeah, I mean, she was thinking, why? Why are you doing this? We don't need to do this. What is your motivation here? And honestly, part of it is, there was a lot of suffering moments during that 6 years. Yeah, sure. Well, economically, it was good. But living on the plane for, getting hazed that you know enough, running around the world to make employees happy, dealing with HR issues that would pop up all over the place because at this point I'm 200 plus people, international company, and just trying to get people to enjoy the work-life balance, et cetera, and of course trying to do well for myself and my family, but also for the employees who that means a lot to me too. I just felt like going through that experience for that 6 years, it was just not right. It didn't feel right for me to let that experience go, to not kind of parlay that in to something else. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, global economic finance and, gaming sort of fundamentally changing from anything we've ever known up until now. And I have a really good solid background to help hopefully be a positive force here. How can I just sit there and say, I'm going to be on a rocking chair? And it didn't feel like a good move.
Sure. Crazy. I mean, definitely not a stranger to adversity. And I think that is extremely important in a founder, in a leader, and somebody who is going to take the company over the goal line, right? You weren't sitting there going, all right, poor me, what are we going to do? It was like, okay, this is life or death. I'm a scrapper. I'm going to make this work. So, but thinking about quality of life too, which you talked about, I mean, the traveling and dealing with all that and being away from the family and the kids, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, that's for sure.
No. And I mean, even taking tough decisions on offices, having to fire people, these types of actions, maybe they're easy for some people, but they're not for me. I can tell you that. At least I can speak for myself.
Yeah.
So it's all this stuff is very personal. I made a pact with myself when I started this 2014 company, DGN Games. And same with InfiniGods. It's I'm doing this to grow as a person. I'm going to meet these adverse challenges that I know are going to come. I feel fundamentally, put the money aside and the economic, upside aside, I only have one life that I know of. I don't want to be sitting there, later in life thinking, okay, there's some other things that I had an opportunity to do. Man, I should have probably tried. I mean, honestly, that was a major motivation for me, even from leaving for that 20-year company. It's if I don't try something legit, give it my all and try it, even though I know I'm going to have those difficult conversations, probably not going to go super well for me the first year. It's going to be pretty hard. Who knows? Maybe I'll have to get personal loans. Who knows what the hell's going to happen? Raise money, whatever. I had to take the decision of philosophically, why am I doing this? It's not an economic thing. It's, hopefully that comes, but it's really more of how do I challenge myself and prove to myself that I can overcome some of these adverse situations, which, by the way, you overcome the adverse situations in business, firing people, taking on difficult situations, tough negotiations, whatever the situation is, you do end up applying that to your daily life, and I think it makes those difficult things that we all experience, it just makes them easier. I could deal with this, wartime like situation in my company. I can deal with some relatively minor issue that comes up in your day to day,
Yeah, very well said. Can you speak to some of those challenges that you're running into current day with building in Web3? Are there regulation challenges? Obviously, we're not getting any guidance on that front.
Putting just Web3 aside, there's challenges in starting a new company. There's challenges in running a company. There's challenges in staffing a company. There's challenges in making that staff happy and keeping and retaining that staff. So forget Web3. We haven't added that in yet. There's those challenges that exist that I certainly am not, even given my experience, it wasn't like I was able to skip over any of that. So that's just that's the kind of cost of doing business stuff. But then there's this additional challenge of Web3 gaming, which is, what is that? How do you even define that? I told you in 2014 when I was starting that company, it was a mature market that I was entering, and that represents sort of a different set of challenges, which, how to break into a mature industry. When you're in a brand new industry that really doesn't even know what it is, that's kind of a whole different set of challenges. I don't want to say it's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, but in some ways it is, to be honest. And so, you really have to understand, what is our place in this market? And maybe we don't know. Maybe a lot of it is, what? Let's get the hell out there and start to experiment. And, regulatory challenges, as you mentioned, we're not getting any of that clarity. In fact, I feel like, time is bringing more opacity. It's making things more opaque than it is clear. And so it's like, okay, look, we have these regulatory challenges. We have technology challenges. It's like, okay, there's blockchains. Which blockchain you're going to be on? Why does it even matter? Are there technical implications? There's economic implications. There's business alignment implications. Then there's all this like fraud. It's like, okay, how about the stigma challenges? Like, oh, okay, you're going to make something in crypto. Well, okay, so are you trying to defraud people? Like, what, are you going to get arrested? So it's like dealing with all this stuff kind of at the same time. Our strategy and my strategy to kind of start to combat some of this from literally the day that we formed InfiniGods was product first. Let's just get something out there. Doesn't need to be in the perfect form, doesn't need to be the perfect game, doesn't need to be on the perfect platform, because quite honestly, I don't think anyone knows what the hell any of those things are in this space anyway. So we're going to learn a lot more by being present and, being in the space and doing stuff and gathering data and talking to players than we are talking about a AAA game that we may or may never make, and then launching, hiring a 30-person plus marketing team, putting a bunch of money into influencers. Those strategies economically might be smart, but we decided that wasn't really for us because we have more long-term goals than maybe some of those other strategies, which could be more beneficial short-term. Through the process of having product in market, I think that's where we got to a point where we really felt like we hit our footing, and we know our strategy became very clear. And, it was clear, which platforms we needed to be on, which kind of, monetization strategies did we need to employ? How do we even talk about crypto in the game? Do we even mention it? What kind of technology integrations do we do? What third parties do we want to form partnerships with? And all this, we've done some really fun community events with other projects like Wolf Game and Pixelball, that I'm really proud of that we did. And then coming into our sort of multi-game strategy and picking the platforms that we need to be on, and what levels of abstraction do we need to put into the game so that people aren't thinking we're defrauding them, etc. This was a big aha moment in a negative way. We first got in the space like, wow, man, this is so cool. Look at all these examples. Look at actually all this money they're making. This is great. What a business opportunity. Amazing. There must be so many Web3 gamers. Man, there's all these people everywhere. They just can't wait, to play Web3 games. And it turns out that doesn't seem to be the case, that there's a lot of speculators in the market and folks like this. But, in fact, people who are in Web3 gaming to play games is, a really small subset of call them global gamers. So that was a bit of a wake up call. And okay, fine. So who are we even targeting with our product, and how do we make sure that we make the right product for the right customer. I mean, people were making a thing for the wrong people. All of that was a learning process, and all of that represented challenges that we overcame through, the journey of being in the space in a pretty short period of time, to be honest with you. Kind of didn't have a choice. The space moves very, very fast.
Yeah.
And which I love, by the way. So that doesn't scare me at all.
Mm-hmm. And you are no stranger to pivoting too, right? I mean, that's huge.
Like, you're a free-to-play mobile space. It's a 24/7 job too. Whenever I woke up, I already had 30 messages. It's like, I'm using all this. It's okay. This is the way things go. So my journey has prepared me for these types of markets, and to kind of go into situations like this and have a calm head around it. Yeah, sure, the market's going to change. Let's not make any hasty decisions, guys. But no, let's chase the shiny objects is typically not a great strategy. Let's take a step back. Yeah, we're going to make mistakes. Actually, if we're not making mistakes, we're not doing enough. I know there's lots of famous people who said that. I firmly believe that, especially in a new market like this. You just have to be patient, listen, and, be determined, have a good team. If there are people on the team that aren't working, you have to be strong enough to make changes when needed. That's part of running a company.
Yeah. Back in Indy, when we met, we talked about regulations, right? And how big companies like the Fortnites and the big Web2 conglomerates, how they are going to have a hard time getting into this space. Basically, the fact that there's no regulatory clarity, right? I mean, are you looking at that as a positive too?
Interesting you bring that up, because it's one of these unusual times where, you as a new entrant have a unique competitive advantage towards existing large companies. I mean, in almost every other situation, like back in 2014, it was not the case. It was the opposite. I was like, how the hell am I going to have a product and not just get crushed by the competition? This new space is actually like being successful makes it more difficult and more of a challenge for you to want to get into Web3, because you have, let's just call it, a significant revenue stream at the end of the day. The larger gaming companies don't have, they have legal teams, they've got revenue to where they've got multiple existing products. And, for them to say, okay, I want to dip my toe, I want to, try this Web3 thing, without that regulatory clarity, which, as we mentioned before, definitely is still, the opaqueness still exists.
Sure.
It just makes it hard for them to say, you know what, I want to do that. Let's do that. Let's jump into this and risk the revenue, potentially multi-billion-dollar revenue streams by getting sued by the SEC or, something like this. Like, why the hell would you do that? Especially now, to be honest with you, as the market goes, it has been bearish for a bit, as we all know. Everyone on this, listening to this podcast as well. Like, no way of me as a big company getting into this. I know there have been some that have started projects in the space. One more recently was Matt Wolf and Zynga, who I know, from Sugartown. And I'm a huge supporter of that. I think that's great. I'm welcome for these companies in the space, but it won't be a all in. I can promise you that. It will be these toe dipping. And, just because you say you're going into Web3, there's sort of this conservative end that you can, be on in Web3. And then there's, call it something you're sort of pushing the envelope more, doing some of the more innovative approaches. And all that's going to be driven by, what kind of a company are you? If I'm an existing competitor with, existing gaming company with multi-billion-dollar revenue, okay, fine, I might try something Web3, but it's going to be as conservative as the market will allow,
Yeah.
So all that for companies like InfiniGods, and all that does is give us a competitive advantage, to really put our stake in this market before we need to worry about, the electronic arts and, these massive companies of the world. And my guess would be what we're going to see over time, and we'll see how this goes, is that these bigger companies are just going to do typically what they do in new markets like this where they're not sure. They'll just sit back and let these InfiniGods of the world fight it out, assuming they're not under constant litigation, start doing larger acquisitions. That's my prediction. Is it typically how you see the larger companies who just aren't okay with the risk.
Yeah. I know you talked a little bit about the long-term goals of InfiniGods. Can you speak a little bit more in depth about those and kind of like your core philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, look, our long-term goal is to be the number one company in the space. And, that could come in a lot of different forms. And right now we're exploring what does that even mean? Is it a revenue goal? Is it a user's goal? Is it converting Web2 users, more called traditional users, into the Web3 space, thereby growing the space, the crypto space in general, or the blockchain / Web3 space in general? Right now, we're focused on making good content for our customers, learning from that content, iterating on that content, and then intersecting sort of well-known game genres and styles. Like, for example, casual games. They've been popular, they're going to always be popular. Strategy games, they've been popular, they're always a popular genre. Look at stuff that we know works in the space, in the industry, the gaming space in general. Then how do we sort of use Web3 elements to make that more interesting? And I think that's where, there's a real sort of clean slate there, like a empty chalkboard. You can sketch out whatever you want there. And so for us, it's how do we migrate those billions of Web2 users? I mean, that's really how we talk about it internally. How do we migrate those billions of Web2 users, gamers, and more specifically, into the Web3 space, hopefully in a way where they don't know that there's Web3, that it's even a Web3 space that they're coming into. All of those details are abstracted away from them. Because I think that until we get to that point as a gaming, community, Web3 gaming community, you're going to continue to run into that friction of stigma and whatever else. Nobody talks about today, they're playing a game on their mobile phone and they're like, I wonder if these people are using Amazon Web Services, or I wonder if they're using Microsoft Azure as their backend. Nobody really gets into that level of detail on, let's call it the technology infrastructure. I feel reasonably confident that that's where we're going to see sort of parallels to that in the Web3 space, where it'll just be, wow, I can own this thing. And what does that really mean to me? What does ownership look like to a non-Web3 person? We know what that means, but what does it mean when you don't know what a wallet is, and you don't even maybe know you have one, and that you can transact things in a marketplace, whether it's the company's marketplace or some third-party marketplace. All that's transparent and it's all provable, and we haven't experienced that as a gaming community on any kind of a scale before. And I think some of those benefits will be things that consumers today will look, in retrospect, will kind of look at games that they're playing in traditional legacy Web2 space or traditional gaming and say, well, wait a minute, I know I do like this game I'm playing, but man, there's a similar game, even maybe it's close, the similar game I'm playing, but I own these things, and what does that mean? Oh wow, and I can trade those to my friends, or I can list that on a marketplace, and I can potentially even make income off of that, especially in other countries where maybe even small amounts of income from gaming represent a new life for certain types of demographics. So I think all of that is super interesting, and being a part of that to us and InfiniGods, and that migration path, and how does that work in the devil's in the details, I think is a really kind of a fun place to be in, something that we're trying to take head on.
Interesting. Where would you say your market is at the current state, right? Are you gearing it towards like the Axie crowd, which is based in the Philippines? Where do you think they are? I mean, the U.S. is a whole nother animal, right?
It's a great question. And I will say that's one of the probably many examples I have, but it's a good one actually, of like something we started out doing, thinking one direction, and kind of over the course of being in the market and testing and trying things, we kind of shifted our thought process. Like I said at the start, we thought there was, thousands upon thousands of Web3 gamers. Yeah, sure, maybe there weren't billions yet, but man, they were coming in at a very fast clip. And, we just needed to focus on those Web3 gamers. Let's focus on where the market is today. That's the place where we should live. And I don't believe that anymore. That market isn't big enough to make a sustainable long-term business, in my opinion. We need to be focused on traditional gamers. People are playing games on their mobile phones. You got to hit them where they're at today. You got to hit them on the devices and the types, the styles of games and genres, etc., that they're used to doing. And then you have to offer them some unique value props that they're not getting today. And then so they say, okay, I like this game well enough, but man, this other one's kind of similar to this. But dude, you can do these other things that make, in my opinion, make it 10x better. And then you will get everyone to shift from, what they're doing today to that next thing by making those value props big enough. And so to answer your question, we're focused more on the global gaming market. Forget Web3, just the traditional gamers that are on mobile, specifically in the mobile market where gamers are, and how do we attract them to our set of products and introduce and those unique selling propositions, unique value propositions in a way that they look at our games like, wow, maybe there's something that's kind of similar to that they already do, but they'll never play the game again because we offer them more. And I know there are Web3 companies that are, doing well off of kind of living in that segment. I think it's just going to be a tough battle to just only live there. The name of the game is going to be about growth and scaling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How would you say you balance the essence of traditional gaming with the decentralized ethos of Web3?
I actually don't bother myself with that issue. I look at it more from what I just talked about. I don't care about the, centralized versus decentralized. I'm like, I have gamers today. They're playing, billions of people. They're playing traditional games. I want to have a successful business that does onboard people into this new style economy. The more people I bring over, better for the ecosystem, better for us as InfiniGods. If that happens through a combination of centralized and decentralized elements, philosophically, I don't bother myself with that. I think it's more important for me to create that level of success and to onboard those users. So how do I offer those users, like I said, like a unique selling proposition that'll get them to migrate from whatever they're doing today or add it in to what they're doing today? We do a lot of off-chain to on-chain kind of migration in our games. So you earn an element in a game. It's off-chain, which means basically it's just how it looks to you today as a traditional Web2 gamer. And then there are discrete points in the game where you can, and discrete reasons why you'd want to convert that item to a traditional call it Web3 1155, 721, or whatever other specific technical bit you're trying to do, and put it on chain. And so there's reasons why you want to put it on chain, because now you can enforce that kind of ownership and use farming, etc. Now, if that token that you have, what does it do is kind of defined by the rules on my game server, which is called a traditional style game server versus having everything on chain. I don't bother myself with those philosophical differences. I want to provide the value to the end user. And I think having that hybrid system where they can be comfortable in what they're doing today, but also get the benefits of the Web3 pieces, give that to them in a way that doesn't expose them to a lot of the technological challenges. Because honestly, even if you're doing some kind of purist Web3 thing, you are giving some value, right? Everything's transacted, everything's provable, but that's incurring a delay to the user, whether you like it or not. It's not free for you to put that thing on chain. It's got to take time. So yeah, you can process it in the background. You can do some technical tricks to kind of minimize how the user perceives those delays. But man, I hate playing on-chain games where like every button I click, I watch a fucking spinning circle for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 60 seconds or more sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is this providing me any value? Okay, great. I know that at the end of the day, maybe this thing I'm minting or whatever this action I took, it might give me some value down the road. you're not going to onboard anybody with that UX. I can tell you right now.
Mm-hmm.
People are so fickle in this gaming industry. Man, if your game, forget Web3, if your game is Web2 and it's crashing or causing any issues, they'll uninstall and move on.
Yeah.
Let alone trying to introduce all this extra complexity. So
Sure.
I feel like it's more important to have that kind of philosophy of just showing consumer value and not worrying so much about the centralized versus decentralized.
Yeah. Great answer. And speaking to the attention spans, the younger population, which is a traditional gamer, they don't have the patience. I mean, I don't have the patience, and I'm 40.
Right? Like 2 minutes or less.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm playing some on-chain games, some people do a much better job, but I might be sitting there for 60 seconds on a freaking transaction, on one transaction. Forget 2 minute or less play session. I'm talking like a click of a button. I haven't even done much. So it's like I don't want to.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
I don't see how that works.
So would you say one of the biggest value propositions of Web3 and what InfiniGods offers is the digital ownership end of it? Do you think that's
it's
like
ownership, and it's all the things that go along with it. It's ownership. It's having the ability to be able to transact and trade in an open marketplace. Ownership seems like a very simplistic way of talking about digital assets and owning those assets, but like proving out that you own those assets and having sort of assets that can come from those assets. Okay, maybe I own this and I own that from someone else, and or I own multiple things in this game, and that yet gives me access to some other thing. I can so freely trade it to my friends, and they get those benefits as well. And then I can like prove without a shadow of a doubt that they own that thing versus, I've got to look at a game database and I'm not really sure. I mentioned before that we have this kind of off-chain to on-chain philosophy on how we deal with our sort of migration between Web2 and Web3. We also, in that particular example, we have one of our games, InfiniMerge. You can take your off-chain followers, which is this little power-up in a game, and you can put it on chain into what's called an arc. And then you can trade to other people. You can list it on the marketplace, wherever you want to do. But my general point is like you having these things and being able to move that into this arc thing, which then you can give to somebody else, like that whole experience and putting it on a marketplace. And then, what does that mean? Oh my God, I mean, I just sold something. We as InfiniGods, we don't mint any arcs. So we've actually enabled seller-side economics. So that's actually a pretty big deal. So yeah, sure, it's just digital ownership, and that's true, but it's also that we've opened the economic participation in our game economy. The only way users can buy ARCs and trade them on a marketplace in that example I gave you is if they're getting them from other players who've decided to put those off-chain things on chain and trade them to other players. So we're not getting involved in that. We're allowing the consumers to own that part of our game economy. And so I think it's, sure, in the end, is it digital ownership? Yeah, it's just digital ownership, asset ownership, but it enables these other things. Like in a traditional gaming, you don't get seller-side economics. It's a one direction. You buy stuff through an in-app purchase, and that's it. Yeah, sure, maybe there's some gray market stuff you can do on the side, but generally that's it. So to do something like this, to use blockchain elements to enable seller-side economics is an innovation in its own way. Certainly a unique value prop that a lot of gamers today just don't have access to.
Yeah. You don't really own these assets, and they can be taken from you, right? I mean, I know that even like, Vitalik starting ETH, right? I mean, with his World of Warcraft, and he literally was like, picture like Vitalik playing this game and then just like shaking back and forth and being like, "What? They took my assets," you know what I mean? And like him just plotting this plan of taking over the world with Ethereum. It's pretty crazy, but it is also it's developing a new class of entrepreneurs. That is something that I think is very powerful in this space. And I
will tell you this to that point. And I'll make it specific about games. Like, I mentioned my company finished in 2020. It was in the casual mobile free-to-play space. And we had products on every mobile store, basically. And that space, just the mobile free-to-play space, is incredibly crowded. I mean, it's like hyper-mature, where if you told me, hey, Damon, you want to start up another casual mobile game? I mean, come on, you got all this experience. We'll get a lot of funding. This will be great. No way, dude. I'm not doing that. No way.
It's too crowded.
It's too crowded. And so if I think, okay, but I love games, I want to stay in the gaming space. I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty unusual for you to see, okay, there's this whole new segment of game that we can do all kinds of new things in that this technology enables, let's say. That to me is also very, very unusual. I thought mobile gaming was kind of dead. Like you're only going to see new games from the big guys. And you may see flash in the pan from a company here or there that, yeah, they have a really popular game, but then it gets killed because the big guys copy it and they already have all the users. And so you can't afford user acquisition anymore because it's too expensive as a Web2 company. And then Web3 comes along and it's like, well, actually, you can provide all these unique value props that should, in the end of the day, really drive down your cost of users because they should just think, why would I stay? There's so many other, so many benefits for me to try these other things.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's kind of reinvigorated this process, which I think, to your point, is drawing in new blood. And there probably will be, by the way, lots of brand new gaming categories that I couldn't even imagine that come from this.
Sure.
We currently anyway, we're kind of straddling the two between the Web 2 and the Web 3, because I think you can't go too far. You're not going to pull people over if you go too far.
Yeah.
You've got to be close. You've got to be close enough for offering enough value prop so that they will switch, but not too far where there's all these technological challenges and they've got to have wallets and they've got to understand this and they've got to have that and all this high barrier or whatever. You got to be really close so that you can just tug them over the line, tug of war.
Yeah.
You got to tug them over that line. So I think that at this point in the market, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And we'll see where the general space ends up migrating to over time. I think, if the regulatory space was more open, I think there would be lots of cool stuff to pursue around staking and all kinds of other really cool things you can do. But staking in particular is an example of an area that has shown to be a little more litigious than others. All of that, sure, at some point will soften and it'll enable, a lot more innovation.
So looking at your love for Wolf Game, can you share your fascination with Wolf Game, and has it influenced anything with the journey with InfiniGods?
It was definitely the first game that got me inspired into this space to where I became passionate about it. Of course, I mentioned other games and, I looked at what they were doing, and there wasn't really a lot of gameplay that I could really experience when I started degenning into NFT assets anyway. So I'm like, cool, I've got all these things. What can I do with them?
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of that happening. And one of the games that just kept standing out to me with just really great execution and just the whole lore elements of how they brought their universe together was Wolf Game. And the idea of, the shepherd and that, no one knows who that person is. Which is just so unheard of in traditional anything. So hold on a second. You mean there's somebody who is running a company and nobody knows? And yeah, we've got them on a call before, or somebody that works in the company and they disguise their voices through these digital whatever. I'm like, this is so fucking bizarre,
right?
So I just got inspired from hearing these stories, and I'm like. So then it was like Alpha Game, right? So it's like, okay, I'm looking at that. What is staking? What do I do? What's this thing called wool? Okay, so I probably need it. So I need to go to this swap, whatever the fuck that is, and I got to do some other stuff. And that's really how I learned. Going through the process, wanting to get engaged in Wolf Game. Converting ETH into wool and using swaps, and then staking animals, which sounds so goofy. And I'm like, just that there's this comedic, element to it. I just fell in love with it almost from the beginning, honestly. And then seeing UGC, the user generated stuff, and how passionate the community was, and jumping in a Discord and kind of monitoring that, and then watching how passionate people were about ranking in Wolf Game and, unlocking wool and going through calculations. What is price of wool to ETH today? And, or USD, going through all of that, and it just blew my mind.
Right.
It was not something I'm familiar with. I'm used to traditional game. Look, I came from the casino world for a long time, so I'm certainly familiar with some kind of real money gaming thing. And so but it just really opened up my mind and to what could be possible. And then at that point, fast forwarding through a little bit of history, but Wolf Game launches Cave Game. And I'm like, okay, come on, what the hell is this? All right, I can't, I had a few animals, I dabbled a little. And, I started playing Cave Game. And at the beginning, I was a little, I feel like too jumpy on my negativity. It's like, man, I don't get
like
it.
It's like overwhelming too, right?
It was too overwhelming, and I didn't really give it a chance. And I'm like, oh, this thing sucks. Then I was like, Damon, you're too set in your old school. You got to get into it and give it a chance. Mm-hmm. So I went the other way. I said, you know what? I'm going to play it for hours until I understand what is the motivation behind it. And I literally walked away from that experience thinking the exact opposite. Like, this game is sheer genius. Mm-hmm. And then as they're integrating in, there was bug fixes along the way, which helped a lot. And then it started integrating in gems, which then led into the farmers and et cetera. Seeing like how that was so well thought out. And I really loved the marketing and how that was done, the messaging on Twitter, which to me, I hadn't really paid a ton of attention to, even in free-to-play mobile. It's more like traditional gaming ads where you showed a clip of the game or whatever. It wasn't actually developing a story that's kind of, So I feel like that the whole package, really resonated with me, and all the way up until the point where, InfiniGods owns an alpha 8. I couldn't be more of a supporter. I don't even know how many assets I've got. A lot, let's say. Of course, full game coming out, and we'll see with Peak Games, etc. I mean, it's gone through its own set of iterations, but I felt like in general the execution on each of these steps, has been really good, especially for a team that you don't know much about, which is cool. My final thought on it is I took a lot of inspiration from Cave Game with regards to how they did their off-chain to on-chain, because I thought it was incredibly brilliant, where you saw a lot of other studios being these Web3 purists, like, oh, we're going to have fucking everything on-chain. That's just how it's done. And Cave Game, to me, was one of the first examples I saw in the marketplace that took a different approach. And I was like, this is exactly how you should do it. You should not do it this other way, because all it's going to introduce is delays and bad UX,
costs,
all this other shit. And I'm like, but then to me, Cave Game felt like it was performance. I didn't have to wait forever for things to happen. And it took a very sort of unique and different spin on things. And, I was really hunting for gems, and just the whole experience for me, kind of for me, Web3 next level,
Yeah, 100% agreed. In the current state with full game, do you feel like they're over-delivering? Do you feel like there needs to be more patience set in with Shep and the team to kind of, let the economy work out? And
I feel like Wolf Game lost its footing, and it was around that full game launch. I think there are pros and cons, let me say this, to being people not knowing who you are and having to sort of maintain that persona. Initially, I was really enamored with that, inspired. Mm-hmm. And I think over time that becomes tough to really execute, because eventually people want to see a fucking roadmap and they want transparency.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you execute simultaneous with transparency and openness while nobody knows who the fuck you are. I think there are ways to do it. I think it's tough no matter how you do it. And so I think it became tiring. So I'm like, Wolfgang would tease this one thing out or this other thing out. And, and prices would moon and, on assets and things. And it just became unsustainable when it's like, you can only do that so often. Right. And so towards the end, I kind of tired of it. I'm like, they're kind of using that same trick. And like, I would see teasing of things and it wouldn't get executed. And, we'd hear about it, and then a month would go by and I didn't hear about it again. Like, well, where is this thing that I heard about? And then the sort of like the communication with the audience slowed, in my opinion. It seemed like it kind of slowed a bit, and there wasn't the style changed slightly. And to me, that's where I started losing my own interest. I think full game in and of itself is an incredibly genius product. I think it takes a lot of balls to make a game like that because it is new and innovative. And it's like this, it's truly like game finance, it's a GameFi product. There isn't a lot of examples you can draw on to say, well, sure, that's worked in the past. We're just tweaking it and changing it. Like it was a full on new development effort.
Sure.
And so I think that's resonated to some degree with the audience or has resonated. But I think in order for it to work in medium to long term, you're going to have to worry about onboarding of new users to feed the beast. The game, the style of communication, the roadmap, the opaqueness, sort of lining that up with the need to onboard new people that don't even know about crypto and all that. I feel like Wolfgame's at a tough point where there's a lot of friction there. And then it's going to be hard to make that wheel work. I feel like the move to Peak Games was smart in some ways, a way to kind of move the project forward. I don't know, man. I think it's tough at this point.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to play a game of skill, typically like the games are now, with the Peak Games, games of skill can be very polarizing. Because what's going to happen is you're going to get people who are just afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid, okay, I don't want to wager 500 wool, 1,000 wool, or 10,000 wool, 100,000 wool. And, I can lose because, I haven't been with the game for the last 2 years and I'm not an expert in everything Wolf game. And why the hell would I even get in this first place? I'm just going to lose my ass on wool. By the way, that's why slot machines are popular, because there's no fucking skill. So you either play table games at the casino, or you just do this anonymous brain dead activity, grab a beer. You don't even need to fucking look at the screen. You just listen to the ding, 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 and you slap one single button, right? And so they're gonna appeal. You're sort of narrowing your appeal when you go down that skill path. It's just going to be tough to find the right balance of skill games that are going to appeal to a broader audience. What is the ultimate end game? I don't know that that's been properly explained. I was happy to be on the journey. I was happy to be in Full Games Now live. Okay, great. I'm monitoring it every day. I'm trying to optimize sheep and doing this and worried about getting attacked there and, breeding and this. Okay, so what happens? For what? Why am I doing this? That wasn't made clear when I think it should have been, before. And so I'm not trying to be critical. I mean, I try to spend like half hour explaining how much I love Wolfgame. I'm just saying, like, to me, that's just genuinely where I think there's been some stumbling.
Yeah, I think that those are very valid points. Onboarding, it is a huge problem currently. I had a friend who I was speaking to a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about Peak Games and how I wanted him to try it, and he's not crypto native at all, so he didn't know what a MetaMask wallet was.
He doesn't. The learning curve to get into Wolfgame's high. So I know there are things to try to help that. And the last point I'll make is when you have a token, it can be a good and a really bad thing. So when your token's at a decent price, it's high fives and hugs. When I got in, it was at 15. It's at 0.0025 right now.
Yeah,
0.0025. So, like, depending on your perspective and when you got into the project, I just don't know. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're, shepherd that is, formerly known as Jesus Christ. I think it's really hard to overcome something like that, where somebody, where you have consumers who have like been part of that journey where maybe they bought in at a different price and now they're like, oh my God, to overcome some of that fun, or that difficulty.
Yeah. I think it's an identity crisis, which you talked about, right? Of not knowing the specific niche of where we're gearing this towards. But ultimately, I'm optimistic in the community, in some of the ones that are still around. Obviously, there's a good bunch of OGs that are still here, and even with the Farmers Council, and that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I do think that it's going to be up to the community to kind of bring it over the goal line and to transition things. I do have faith in Pixel Vault coming in. I do like Goose. I think he's kind of a next level thinker, kind of a similar background, working in the gambling arena, which I think could be kind of interesting to throw that into the mix. I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm hopeful.
About the Pixelvault move. I have assets in both projects.
Yeah.
I'm on the core committee for Pixelvault.
Oh, nice.
So I listen in on sort of the things that they're doing. I give them a lot of credit. They've really done a lot in the space, been a pioneer. So, it's hard not to be inspired by them as a project as well. I told you we did sub-community merge games with, one was Wolf Game and the other one's Pixelvault. I mean, we were definitely inspired by, those projects, obviously. Seeing that kind of, combination is definitely powerful. If I'm in a decision-making position on Wolf Game, I'm probably going out the box. I'm not going to be afraid of trying some different some new things there. I think that's probably what's needed. There's a great foundation, really think through how do we take that into something that can be more, widely adopted, at least try it. It's worth that. And I think that the core IP is amazing. So, I mean, that's hard to build, and having that strong core IP definitely should make everyone optimistic in the project.
Sure.
And it's just in the end, dude, it's all about execution. And look, you're going to make failures. That's fine. Just you got to keep going. You got to keep iterating. You got to listen to your customers, and you got to be, like you say, with the identity crisis, you have to be clear on who it is you're trying to target as a customer. We certainly changed our minds on that a few times,
Sure.
And be willing to, acknowledge that we need to take a different direction and be aggressive on making a decision and moving and doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all my editorial comments here,
no, I mean, these are very...
They're supporters of us. I love all the people in Wolf Game. I'm just trying to be real about some challenges. I think probably everybody in the project knows this, so it's not like I'm pointing things out that no one, it's like, well,
sure.
I've heard it before, so, I really...
Well, it's good to bring it to light, too, right? Yeah. I mean, everybody, we talk about the WAGMI army, and there's a select few community members that like to throw shade at people who I guess are a little too optimist, maybe like myself. But, at the end of the day, we've got to come together as a community to help get this moving in the right direction. And I think, we have to take ownership in that too, because essentially it really does feel like a partnership. So I feel a bit indebted to the team. And
I think that's actually a really cool point with just Web3 gaming in general. I do think that these projects feel more like partnership projects than games that I've worked on in the past. And, you bring up a really good one in Wolf Game. And I think the strength with Wolf Game in their community, of course, is incredibly strong. Obviously all these listeners know that. But I think in general, Web3 lends itself to those types of close collaborations with communities. And, if you listen to your community and you're open-minded to working with them, I do think great things can happen. We're in a tough market, man. I mean, it's like even the people that were traditionally doing the best are struggling. So, part of it is market forces too. And I'm absolutely 1,000% optimistic on that those forces will change. Will come around to being bullish, and we will hit a crazy bull cycle when it comes around the next time. It's just a matter of working through from now to then and actually enjoying the journey. I mean, we're in a very unique time to be part of this journey. There won't be anyone that can say this, 10 years, 20 years from now, that they were, that aren't there now, that can say that they were here now. I could absolutely picture, people saying, man, I wish I was around in those early days. That must have been really fun and interesting.
Sure.
And you know what? It is fun and interesting. And it's difficult when you're in, some kind of down market cycle. And you know what? You got to do what you got to do to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Solving hard problems, I think is.
And don't be afraid of the hard problem. Like the only way you're going to solve it is acknowledge that it exists. You ain't going to solve it. So, you think like, hey, my user base is too small. Well, then fucking make it bigger. Okay, well, my game isn't maybe conducive yet for that. Okay, well, then fucking change it so that you can do it. It is what it is, man. We're all suffering the same problems, So I think it's like you say, it's us coming together as a maybe gaming community within our specific communities, but also as a Web3 community. I think the rising tide will lift all ships, and I think we can help each other out. I don't think it's a zero-sum market. I think it's a market where there will be lots of winners. To the extent that we help each other, it's going to help ourselves along the way. So
Sure.
happy to be part of a lot of different projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Great points. I do want to go into a mystery question here, Damon.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So in the rapidly evolving landscape of Web3, surprises are right around the corner, right? So can you share a unexpected intersection or collaboration from an entirely different industry that might be on the horizon for InfiniGods?
Okay, in different industry.
Something, that could further blur the lines between gaming and maybe other realms?
Man, I love where you're going with this. So I think in general, I will say this. I think there's a huge convergence coming. I think there's going to be a lot of overlap between real money gaming in the future once we get, I think, more regulatory clarity. So
Yeah.
there's you have to be very careful around gambling legislation and legalization. I mean, that'll shut you down faster than you can blink. If there's I can buy something, quote unquote, stake it or wager it for an outcome that is probabilistic or luck based, and then I can get a outcome from that I can cash out. Like, that's gambling. So and it's governed by a pretty strict set of rules. I do think, though, there's ways by introducing skill as an example, and maybe some other ways that you can live within those boundaries, but still get at sort of some of those motivations. I mean, to me, honestly, I feel like even playing a game like Candy Crush, which clearly is not, you don't take money out of that game. It's not a gambling game. It feels like it has a lot of similarities, in my personal opinion. When I buy a loot box in a game, and any traditional game, and there's a chance for me to get a 2% chance I get the rarest thing, or a 98% chance I get the most common thing. Like, it's me, gambling on the fact that wagering on the fact that I might be able to get this more rare thing. Well, Web3 has a lot of this kind of rarity, scarcity built into it by the nature of how the technology is being kind of used, and so I think that I do see a lot of crossover, because you have the financial aspect and you have this other stuff, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to explore that in a way that I think could be really, really interesting, short of making, blockchain-based casinos, which I know there are some. But I think there's way more interesting things beyond that are more non-traditional. And I see those applications coming into this space, whether it's through InfiniGods or others. I could even say Wolfgame has pioneered some of that with Peak Games, by bringing in the skill element into it, which is taking it away from that wagering risk. I think there's some real cool opportunities there that it's not lost on me, obviously, that I have 25 plus years of experience in that particular space.
Sure.
And that that psychology, you can, elicit those same types of reactions from people, even if you package up the game in a different way, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great answer for sure. I like the idea of the social end of it, right? With Alpha Game. I think that, Shep had such a brilliant idea with the marketing end of it with the community. Just basically saying, this is an organic, like, hey, you will be rewarded. Whoever has the best, content or whatever. And, people were putting out wild things. And so.
And I mean, really high quality stuff too. Wait a minute, do they pay these people? And that was my first, when I saw some of it on Twitter, I'm like, this is professional level content.
Yeah.
And, but it was just for the love of that.
Exactly.
And I think that is a really powerful message. And I think I do applaud Wolfgame for being, one of truly pioneering in that way.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think the community that has gotten so beaten up just overall in this bear that they're starting to think the current community members, content creators of the game are getting compensated somehow, right? They're like, so what's going on? I mean, these guys are crazy enough to continue to provide this content. Like, we're in this bear, they've got to be doing something, right? Or there's like that trust issue.
I mean, look, if in the end, you need to be rewarding people who are really, stepping up. So like, I don't know the specifics of what's happening with any kind of incentivized system between those content creators, but I can tell you, I'd be super open-minded to that, to some level of compensation for people who are stepping up in the community. I mean, you should be rewarding people who are helping you along the way, and your community is definitely the core of that, to the extent that you make them feel like they should be doing that more, and that their efforts are not going missed. It's just like anything, right? It's like any employee or anyone in an organization, if means even a simple call once in a while to say thank you, or a simple message, that may be enough of a motivation for someone to be like, wow, Shep reached out to me and said I did a good job. Well, that's fucking awesome. And I've seen posts like this, by the way, where he has reached out, sort of thank people and giving people a long way, whatever it is. And so I'm absolutely, aligned with that kind of philosophy.
Yeah. Do you see yourself kind of instilling that more with the InfiniGod community?
I think our community has been so amazing. In particular, with the latest launch, where we've done this mobile game, King of Destiny, which we just released, and it's on iOS and Android stores. You only have so many internal resources, right? Like you have so many QA, quality assurance / tester people. You have so many developers, you have artists, you've got designers, et cetera. In traditional gaming, when you launch a product, there's so many things that you need to tweak and optimize and monitor, et cetera. Certainly like issues, right? Like, oh, I'm playing it in this one small, this one specific setup I have, this configuration on my machine, and I'm playing it, and I get to this part of the game and it gets stuck or whatever.
There's a bug,
Or this message was very unclear to me in the game, or hey man, I dig what you're doing here, but I just want to give you my opinion. If you change it just a little bit like this, I think it makes a lot more sense. Like, you'd be shocked how much of that type of feedback we get from the community. And I mean, I don't have, 50 testers on my game. We're not at that level yet, So like, or, people literally going through and passionately playing through, looking for these types of things and providing them feedback. But we do with our community, we get pretty regularly this type of feedback. There are like power users, people who are, doing more than others, but man, that's not something I'm used to seeing in a traditional gaming setting.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And you have a lot of history in which you talked about, like the rewards and employees. You've had over, thousands of employees, I'm sure at certain points, right? And the importance of making them feel special. So I think it would be kind of cool too to really hone in on community rewards and making more maybe contests. And I know Brian is obviously very creative.
I have such a great team that takes care of a lot of this, So it's like I don't want to take credit for any of this. Do we do this? Yes. Is it me? No. I have people way more skilled than me. Like Bry is, he's like world class, at this, and Caleb is in all the time. And the co-founder, we've got Matt Jackson, who's in our chief operating officer, is always monitoring channels to get the feedback, to look at product stability, et cetera. So I mean. Most of I have my own personal views on stuff, which I'm sure the listener can easily filter. But like anything that when it comes down to doing stuff, it's your team that's doing it. It's not me personally. Happy to have A-class talent that I don't need to, community rewards. Like, even if I wanted to brainstorm community rewards, Bryce probably already thought of 20 new ones. That are like,
you're wasting your time.
Ideas I would have. So it's like, I'm just going to call him and say, hey, man, can you tell me what's the latest update on community rewards? And he probably has like a sheet of paper with like all of the next level, the roadmap of these things. So it's like, I think getting the right team around you and spending time on that, but that is definitely a way to sort of stack the odds in your favor. You
Right.
can be a one-person wrecking machine, in a good way, superhero, however you want to call it. But that's not going to work long term and do it after a certain scale.
Yeah.
So I learned that in my 2014 company. It's like I did a lot of this stuff by myself originally, and then I actually took like 2 steps back for like 6 months before I took another 2 steps or 3 steps forward, because I had to pay for the fact that I was just so reliant on so few members, including myself. And that was actually one of the promises I made to myself when I started InfiniGods, was like, let's surround ourselves with at least a
Yeah.
good core and kind of stack the odds in our favor to the extent that it can be.
Sure.
The members that we have, I feel, pretty proud of what they've accomplished, and I don't have to say anything about them because their actions speak for themselves. You kind of leave it in the hands of people who are really good, and they'll do stuff beyond what you would even have told them to do anyway.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that's a quality of a true leader too, being able to surround yourself around the right team and put people in the right places. I think is super important. And you do have an awesome team. Everybody has been, like you talked about, just like the communication's huge. They get it. They're in this space. They also have came from being a successful, either entrepreneur or business professional.
Right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
as a leader, you just have to check your ego at the door. It's really hard, by the way. Like, I trip over my ego all the damn time. And I think that's one thing I've learned in my years is you got to shut that demon up.
Sure.
that can really ruin things quickly. I think you have to take conscious effort and time to manage egos, but your own and your staff.
Yeah,
and
pride will bite you.
In check. I really do believe that that opens up your organization a lot more for awesome things to happen.
Yeah, it seems like you have a white belt mentality going into things, right? Even though you're a black belt mentally, right? You go into every situation with, hey, what am I missing here, or what haven't I considered? So, very important.
I only think that way, to be honest with you, not to give myself more credit than I deserve. I only think that way because I fucked up so many times, and I actually had the opposite mindset where I was like, oh no, come on, man, I have all this experience, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
I know how to do it until I don't.
Sure.
Then what do I do?
Right. Yeah. You've gotten punched in the face.
So the users should be doing this, and they're not. Fuck. What can I? Where did I go wrong? It's like, dude, you got to check your ego here, brother. That ain't how this works. And I think it's making mistakes, and that's where I do think like having experience behind you. Honestly, even a bunch of failures is great. Having experience behind you puts you in a better spot over the long term.
Man, I'm sure we can go on for hours, dude.
Yeah, you already have.
But yeah, I really do appreciate it. Anything that you wanted to touch on?
What I want my listeners to do, I want them to play King of Destiny. We got a new mobile game. It's live in 3 countries. DM us, reach out to InfiniGods. I'd love to get feedback on this game. It's going to be globally launched too by the end of the year anyway. I really want feedback because I want to make a product that is a mass market product, not a Web3 specific product, but it does have Web3 elements in it. And I think the success of King of Destiny in our selfish specific example, but I think this industry needs a broad-based success that spans not just Web3 specific audience, but then we as InfiniGods or a Web3 company are able to demonstrate that we were able to scale that with traditional users as well. And so I'd love to bring that success to the space, like I said, not just for us, but honestly, even to like move the damn ball forward on this industry, because I feel like not a zero-sum game. We need lots of winners here. I'll appreciate any support. And, I'm also happy to reciprocate and to support other projects, of which I'm an asset holder and owner of assets in many, many, many projects.
Yeah. So as far as moving forward with getting into InfiniGods, if you've never played the game, what is your upfront investment to start playing?
Well, we have free-to-play games, so there is no upfront investment.
Perfect.
I don't believe in a sort of a gated experience. There's a lot of at least certainly the early Web3 games, you had to have digital assets or assets in general, or you had to pay to get into the ecosystem to experience it at all. I think that is the wrong approach and will be shown in the future to not be scalable. It already has been shown to be not be scalable, but
Sure.
that's why if you look at the whole industry of casual mobile free to play, it's sort of the largest gaming industry. It's a freemium model, right? It's you get in for free, you get to play, you can do most things. And then if you decide to pull the trigger and do a purchase on an asset, in this case, maybe it's an in-app purchase or something, or in our case, maybe it's buying an NFT or something like that, dude, that's all up to you. You should have the freedom to be able to explore without having to do any of that first.
Yeah, love that.
So all of our games, InfiniGods is on our website, Moral Siege is on our website, free-to-play games. And then it's launched now, but only in 3 countries, but coming globally very, very soon is King of Destiny, again, free-to-play casual mobile, hybrid monetization between in-app purchase, your traditional style, and then we threw in that kind of off-chain to on-chain Web3 to unlock all those sort of unique selling propositions, unique value propositions for users. I'm confident that we will make that work as an InfiniGods, and I'm also confident that as a broader Web3 gaming space, this will be the next wave of global gaming. It's just a matter of when, not if.
Yeah. Very powerful, Damon. I really do appreciate all of the amazing insights you've provided from your journey starting in really 1997, I believe that was, right? And you're kind of like the master Yoda in this space with all with all the youngins, right? So
I really appreciate giving me the airtime for all this. I think it's great, and I love these long form conversations where you get down to like, what are people really thinking? I didn't get the questions ahead of time. We didn't really talk about any of this content. I wanted it to be free form because I wanted to feel like the way that it truly is, which is a genuine conversation between us and, just try to share some thoughts that hopefully are useful to your audience. And certainly was a good time for me as well.
Yeah, 100%. Hey everyone, what is up? It is Digital Optimist here. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Den. Quick favor to ask, hit that subscribe button. When you hit that subscribe button, that's going to allow me to attract top tier guests to provide you with the most value possible. Give me a follow over on X at Digital Optimist.